Hello, my name is Jeremy Ross. I'm the soybean agronomist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. And
I'm Robb Dedman with Ultimate Ag Crop Consulting in Southeast Arkansas. I'm an independent crop consultant.
and you're going to listen to our presentation, joint presentation. We got some really good information, I think, on foliar feeds. And so just bear with us for a second while we get the presentation started. So you can see the title of both of our presentations. I'm going to let Robb go first. He's going to be talking about soil fertility in soybeans and when not to use foliar fertilizers. And then I'm going to follow up after he concludes with his talk on soybean foliar fertilization evaluation, what is and what is not working. So I'm going to hand it over to Robb and let him do his presentation.
Thanks, Jeremy. Today we're going to be talking about high yielding soybeans. In the past, we've talked about them. We're going to add a couple of new kicks to it today, kind of try to break into it a little more. In this presentation, as we go, I've asked Jeremy to kind of add a few comments along. So he's going to have a few comments in with us, and we'll see how we can do this. COVID-19 has really changed the way we're all meeting now. So I hope we can provide you with some good information today. It's not advancing. Okay. When we talk about high yields to everybody can mean a different thing. It can be a different number. To one person, a good analogy would be is, I may think I'm fat. Somebody else may not think I'm fat. So high yields are different to every farmer. High yields aren't necessarily 100 bushel soybeans every time. They're not necessarily 80, So, what you consider high yields are where you're making more than you were before. Let's use that terminology maybe for today. Some key ways to increase soybean yields, that I feel are very important is fertility and timing. Look at your varieties that you're planting. Make sure they match where you're planting them at. Soil types, drainage types, climate types. Look at your planting techniques, whether you're planting a single row configuration, a twin row configuration, or, where some people planting still drilling beans and things like that. And then, ultimately we know that weed control and we've got to reduce the stress. You put stress on anybody and you're going to take away from their productivity. So you put stress on a plant, you're going to take away from its ability to yield. Proper irrigation is important. Be able to get the beans harvested correctly and be timely. You can't say that word enough. Be timely. And then don't be afraid to experiment on your own farm. Fertility. We're going to kind of get in and out of fertility through this whole presentation because that's really where I want to focus. You can't put enough in fertility on a good quality soil test. I personally believe that fertility starts in the soil. If the good Lord intended on us to feed plants any other way, he'd have put the roots on top, he'd have put the leaves below ground. So, get a good quality soil test, grid samples, zone samples, be consistent in what you do. It doesn't really matter. Everybody's got their own opinion of that. I'm not here to change opinions, but whatever you do, get consistent, good results, get multiple years of data to where you can look at that. Soil tests are not the gospel, but they do show good trends, and then pick the correct fertilizers that you need and the correct time of the year to put them out. I like to look at, I like pre-plant fertilizer being right in front of the crop being planted. I don't like exposure through the winter of fertilizer being put out in the fall and then it having to go through the weathering processes of a lot of rain that we get in the Mid-South. Hot, cold, breaking it down, leaching, whether it's vertical or horizontal. So, and then be willing to feed that plant in season if you need to. Sometimes I like to take fertilizer and actually try to time the application of it so that it's there and ready to go and available to the plant when the plant most needs it. There's been a lot of work done over the years with these nutrient growth curves, or these nutrient uptake curves as they're called. Um, and if you use those and you watch them, and then you try to time them to your area, you can get a pretty good idea when these plants have peak uptake. So you can you can say that at R3, we need to really have a lot of potassium starting to be available to the plant, and make sure you've got plenty there at that time. Tissue testing is a good way to monitor nutrients in the plant that you're actually getting in the plant during in-season times. Sometimes you can tissue sample a plant and then take a soil sample at the same location and compare the two. Do I have it in the soil for the plant to take up, or is the plant just not taking it up? If it's there and the plant's not taking it up, then maybe you need to look at, have I got a stress on the plant? Do I have nematodes, other pests that are affecting uptake? So, if it's in the soil, the plant should be able to get it. So use tissue sampling and testing as a tool also. Tissue testing is probably one of the most controversial topics in ag, because those tests, they're not the gospel. They're a guide, so use them. And then we're going to, we'll kind of talk a little bit about these foliar fertilizers. And, that list is endless. The choices that we can make on foliar fertilizers can go along for days. I mean, we can sit here and talk about that for days. But anyway, so start strong. Pick the right varieties for your farm. Do your homework. Variety selection starts the year before. Put in on-farm plots. Look at what you did the previous year with varieties. Look at what your neighbor did. Compare soil types. So do your homework. There's a lot that goes into that. And we started planting variety selection last year for this crop, and it goes on all through the winter. Find the planting system that works on your farm. Particularly, my guys that I work with, we like the twin row planting system. On these 38-inch beds, we're in an area that still grows a lot of cotton, so they use a lot of 38-inch rows. The twin row system, we don't have the really ultra close plant space, so we get some space between the plants. They can bush out a little bit, but also we can canopy those rows and those centers really quickly with that system, because and that helps with the weed control and moisture conservation. But quality planting equipment, look at your planting equipment, make sure it's right. We've got to be able to get uniform depth, uniform rates. Planting, I think planting soybeans is as important as planting corn. I don't like to see a lot of skips and a lot of doubles, because, uniformity, that's what we want. We want everything as uniform as we can get. And then, we got to get that stand established. If we get a crusting situation, they have a hard time getting up. The key is we've got to get the seed planted right, get them up quick, and have that uniform stand. We got to reduce the stress on the plants. Stress is loss of pods. We've seen it. We get hot and dry, we'll start aborting pods and aborting blooms. Weed control brings stress. If we've got a grown up field, and the weeds will compete with the plant, and if we don't, water it or manage the diseases and insects, all of those bring stresses on those plants. So we've got to make sure that we minimize that stress. I can't stress reducing stress enough. So get on past the stress, and then, good weed control. We've got technology after technology out there today that works. Key takeaway is I like to overlap residuals, start clean, stay clean. Had a scientist one time tell me, an old weed scientist friend of mine, he said the best weed on the farm is the one you never see. So overlap those residuals, maybe come back. Hopefully you come back with one over the top application to control post-emerge weeds and get away from them quick and get those canopies, get those centers closed up and get rid of the weeds, get that off your list of things to do. Irrigation, we've got to make sure that we're irrigating correctly. We can irrigate too little. We can irrigate too much. Use pipe planter. Can't say enough for it. It's probably one of the best products out there on the market. It's free. It will help you get the exact watering times, pipe layouts, and all of that for your fields. Then get the water off the field. It's important to get it on, but it's important to get it off. And so drainage, I see so many places. I had a scenario one time that I had a farm that water was staying on the bottom of the fields, and wasn't that it was like flooding them out, but the fields were staying wet. And it's because we couldn't get all of the water off the bottoms of the fields quickly. We were reducing yields by 10 to 15 bushels. And when we showed that to the landowner, it was like instantly we got more drainage. So drainage is key. Get the water on, get the water off. I like the water sensors. Aquarius Farm Controls. I really like the products that they're producing out there today, in conjunction with pipe planter, so you can, not only are we going to get the right amount of water out there, we're going to get it the right times, get it the right place. Should be able to see about a 20-25% savings in using the water sensors. You'll see additional savings using pipe planter. So it's not only going to make your life easier, it's going to save you money at the end of the day.
All
Jeremy?
Right. So Rob, you're talking about sensors, and we've actually implemented this into the verification program. So what are y'all putting sensors on every field, or are you kind of picking a representative field and then kind of basing that, using the field, surrounding fields around those sensors to trigger irrigation? So what's kind of y'all's philosophy on using sensors, and then how many sensors are y'all using?
So to answer that question, I like the representative outlook on a farm, and let's just say if you've got a 40 acre or a 40 field farm all in one block, couple of different soil types, couple of different crops. I like to go with sensors in the soil types, sensors in the crops. I think you've got to look at sensors by planting date. If we've got two really spread out planting dates, then maybe we need to have sensors in the early planting and the late planting, sensors in the the sand or the heavy dirt, and then sensors in the corn, sensors in the beans, or sensors in the cotton. And maybe you don't need to have them on every field. I don't know that every field is important. And when I do that, I like to have 3 sensors per setup is my goal. I like to look at, 6, 12, 18 inch depth. Some people like a 4 sensor setup. I feel like we get a pretty good representation at the 6, 12, 18 depths. So, that's where we like to go with them.
Okay. So you are seeing some savings in the number of irrigations using the sensors?
Typically, if we're going to irrigate, if we have to irrigate 5 times in a summer, we'll reduce that down to 4 with the sensors.
All right.
It's about a 20% savings with the sensors right off the top.
And that's kind of what I've been hearing from other individuals that are using the sensors too. I like them. I think it's interesting to watch the pattern throughout the season, because you can definitely tell, how deep the roots are, with your different levels of your sensors. And really, when you really start getting down into those deep depths, you can really see, where the root system is and where that water's being used.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen where the sensors, when we aren't getting water usage at those deeper depths later in the season, then that's also a good indicator that, hey, maybe that's a field that needs some deep tillage or some corrective measures taken on it in the fall. And but definitely, I think when you put pipe planner or any computerized hole selection program with the sensors, I think everything starts stacking up. I think there's opportunities for 30, 40% water savings on a farm. But so we'll move on. Disease control. It's one of the stresses. Prevent it. Do what you got to do. Pick varieties with resistance. Find the main diseases that you've got to control. Be aware of the secondary diseases. When we're looking at beans and we're trying to get rid of every little problem that we can find, and maybe sometimes we don't pay attention enough to the little secondary diseases and things that we're not, we key in on frog eye and aerial web blight and things like that, and nematodes and things like that. Maybe we need to be keying in on some of the secondary diseases too. You got to manage your nematodes. It's the areas that I work in. We have a lot of sandy silt loam type soils. Root knot nematode becomes a real problem for us. We manage those with rotation. We manage those with resistant varieties and through seed treatments. So, you've got to reduce that stress. Also, all of those things are yield robbers. And our goal here is to not give up the yield. Same thing on insect control. Which ones are going to affect your crop? Know your thresholds. Know that as yield and price increases, thresholds will change. Find you a consultant to work with, scout them effectively, scout them timely, and then be aware of, those key yield robbing pests. For example, that red banded stink bug, it can do a lot of damage really quick. So be on top of your game when you go into the insect season.
So on the red banded stink bugs, did y'all have to spray for those this year? I knew coming into 2020, a lot of us at the university were concerned that we had such a mild winter, the fall of 2019 going into 2020, that we were concerned that red bandits were going to be a problem. And I think there were some fields sprayed in the southern part of the state, but I don't think it was as bad, as we anticipated, early in 2020. But did y'all have to spray any fields? And if so, did y'all have to do multiple applications, or were you able to kind of control them with one application of an insecticide?
That's a great question, because going into 2020, we were scared to death, and we heard horror stories of shortages on products that we would need to control the red bands with. So we did a little stocking up, made sure we were prepared in case we were really worried we were going to see them. We did spray some fields, but we did not have to spray every field. We had a certain planting date in there that we kind of had to spray those beans, and we were just able to, when we saw them one week, you were just about able to guarantee next week you're going to have to spray that field. It almost got into that pattern. And 1 week we'd have like a 1, the next week we'd have 4 to 6 in our counts. The respray fields were really interesting. And I think this, I try to get everybody to do this whenever. Be aware of the water volumes that you need for every application that you make. Some things need more water, some things need less water, but I think water volume rates for insecticides, herbicides, I don't think we pay enough attention to them. Everywhere we resprayed was around wood lines, fence rows, power lines. The reason we had to respray them is because we did not get a good coverage the first time. The first application, we did not get a good enough coverage to get the complete knockdown we had. And and sometimes you can trim a field with a red banded stink bug. In my business, there's no trimming, there's no spot spraying red bands. We spray the whole field if we have to go back. It's such a I guess the word would be a violent pest, and it can affect your yield and your quality so fast that you can't take any chances with it. So moving on, I want to talk just a second about halogen. It was used on a lot of acres in South Arkansas. It was used on a lot of acres in North Arkansas. There was great success with it for the money it cost. We were putting some of it out in the R3 timing when we were making those fungicide applications. So basically, we were piggybacking it. Didn't have any additional application cost with it. Got great control of the bow worms, and so that's a definite product that's a huge bang for your buck. I think Jeremy and them have had a lot of success with it and the work they've done.
Yep, we have. I mean, I was on the master's committee of the student who kind of started looking at this back a few years ago and was really impressed with the data coming out of his project. And so I've been really interested in, this particular product because, usually we're kind of leery on, bioinsecticides, biofungicides, whatever, you want to call these products, but this one actually worked. I mean, it looks really, really good. There is, a few precautions. The worm size needs to be a little bit smaller. The threshold is a little bit lower on this just because it is a biological control. It takes a little while for it to get going in the field, but once it gets established, I mean, it persists, for several weeks, if not longer than a few weeks. A couple of instances I did hear, they were seeing dying worms out to about 40 days. So Rob, what kind of persistency did y'all see on y'all's? Did y'all see, that long period, or was it able to kind of control the worms and it, the worms kind of disappeared after a few weeks? What kind of residuals were y'all seeing?
So when we started that application, was at that R2.75, R3 stage, and we would be picking up 1-2 very small bow worms at the time, quarter, 1/8-inch bow worms, and we were picking. So we had low populations, we had small worms. We made that application. Next week we may see a little increase in size on the worms, but by the week following, we quit picking up worms altogether, and I have yet to have to spray a field behind the heligen application. It seems to really, those bow worms become a mute point for me, especially when I've been spraying them at that timing of and having really good luck with it. It's just the numbers will stay low to zero, and so we've had really good luck with it.
And I think probably the biggest benefit is the cost. It's fairly inexpensive compared to other insecticide applications. And so as long as you get that timing down right and you can get it activated in the field, for what little you have to pay for it, if you can get at least 2 or 3 weeks of residual control out of it, I think it's worth it.
Oh yeah. So, we're throwing it in with the fungicide, like I've said, and it's cheap enough to do that with if you've got any population at all. Now, in order for it to even remotely work, you've got to have some type of a population for it to begin its reproduction of the virus in the pest and in the plant. So you've got to have something out there to go after. So you can't have a zero and then put it out there and expect to get a result. You've got to have a worm or two to make it work.
Yeah, because this is a obligate parasite, so it needs a host to reproduce. But we do have situations where a producer would come to us asking would heligen work in a situation, and if the worms are too big or the population's too big, we will definitely say no, that is not the right situation for this particular product, and you need to go with a normal insecticide. So we have a pretty good feeling for how this works, and we look forward to continue using this down the road.
Sure. It's I think the people at Ag Bio have created a good product for us, and I hope to see more out of their company in later dates. Before we talk about experimenting on your farm, I want to talk about the fertilizers. We really, that's the topic here. And I think that we want to spend a little time here. It's important, as we talked about with those soil tests, that we want to feed the plant through the soil, we want to, first thing, when I'm looking at these soil tests, the absolute first thing I'm going to look at is the pH of the soil. pH, if we've got a good pH, we've got a good calcium level in the soil, then the next thing I want to go to looking at is I want to look at the P and the K for the soybeans. And because without a good pH, you can put all the P and K in the world out there and you're not going to get an efficient uptake. So, I've had growers ask me, I've only got a limited budget. What do I fix first? And it's always pH. So we're going to look at the macronutrients and key in on those, calcium, potassium, phosphorus. And then we'll start looking at the micros. If those are all in good shape, we got to look at sulfur. Beans are an efficient user of sulfur. We've got to look at boron, manganese, iron. I mean, that list, we all know the list of micros that we need to look at. And just going and getting an 01836 and throwing a couple of 100 pounds of that out there is not really the way we need to do it anymore. If you look at the removal rates of some of these high yielding soybeans, the amount of fertilizer that needs to be put back on these fields is astronomical. And a farmer says, well, I can't afford that. And my answer to that is you can't afford not to do that. If you don't feed it, it's going to starve to death. And if it starves to death, it's going to get rid of the fruit because that plant's going to survive whether it has any fruit or not. It's really important to pay attention to those. If you've got your fertility right in the soil, and then you want to come back and you take a tissue sample and it shows that you have a little bit of a potassium deficiency for some reason, or a boron deficiency, or several, that's when we want to use a foliar fertilizer. These products can be costly, but they are there to help with in-crop deficiencies, and they're very effective on that. By no means do I ever recommend for a person to get all of their fertility for a crop through a foliar fertilizer. Now, make sure that we don't confuse foliar fertilizers with liquid fertilizer. There are liquid forms of potassium that can be put for in-soil fertility. There's liquid forms of phosphorus, nitrogen, so we can put liquid fertilizer in the soil for fertility. But that is, I think it's important that we know that that's different than doing these foliar products. I always hear that foliar products are snake oils, and I used to say that, but they're not snake oils if they're used correctly. They're good products, and these companies have worked hard to develop products that will help us correct deficiencies. It takes time for granular potash, or muriate of potash to break down and become plant available. And when you use a product like potassium acetate as a foliar, even though you're not getting a lot, but it's a quick boost to that plant and can help you overcome deficiencies in that plant. It's they're very important. So they have their place. And I think the take home message is get your fertility right in your soil, get your pH right, and then use those products and find a company that you can work with. Find a company that's not encouraging you to rely on their foliar products for the entire fertility of your crop, and I've heard that out there in the field. So, when they're just wanting to help you fix problems, because believe me, there's plenty of problems out there to fix. That's the guy you want to be working with. But, when I talk about experimenting on your farm, put variety of strip trials out there. Try you, if you're a 12-row planter, try you 12 bags of different varieties, or try you, multiple varieties and then just a header width and see what you do. And you're going to find the varieties that will work good for your farm. Try different fertility products, get your base, what I call your base fertility right. And then look at some of these different foliars, and you'll find products that'll help you. There's products out there that'll give you a couple of bushel yield increase, and you'll get a return on your investment. And I think at the end of the day, that's the key goal, is we all want to get a greater return on investment. And with higher prices this year than we've seen in the last few years, manage this crop, take advantage of the opportunity that we're going to have to make profits. Don't just walk out there and say, well, I'm planting beans today, and throw a little fertilizer out there. Look for the deficiencies and find them, and then act on them when you do find them.
Yeah. So I'd like to weigh in a little bit on what Robb's kind of talked about. So, Robb, you talked about fertility, and, the key to getting a good fertility prescription is a good soil sample. And so I kind of akin soil sampling to kind of sighting in a rifle. So you can go out there and pull one soil sample out of an 80-acre field, and you might be able to hit paper. And then you can go out there and break it down into, 40-acre section and get a little bit more refined. But what kind of practice do y'all do on soil sampling and on y'all's particular operation?
Yeah, so we like grid sampling. I'm of the grid sampling mentality. I'm a huge believer in the University of Arkansas soil lab. They've always done a good job for me. My data seems to be relatively consistent coming out of there. We're paying for that lab with our tonnage taxes. So I tell my guys, let's use it, and it's worked. It's worked for us. But I think that, everything that we do on 2-acre grids, and we do them every other year. So we're staying on top of our soil samples and our fertility, and we're getting a yield response with it. And with the yield response we're removing, when you have high soybean yields, and you're removing that amount of nutrients from the soil, I just don't feel like that you can spread it out much more than 2 years. And we're seeing after about 5 years of consistent variable rate application that our variable rate is now becoming more flat rate. And farmer says, well, why do I need to continue to grid sample? Because we want to continue to monitor for highs and lows. And our philosophy is we look at the highs, and are the lows able to come to the highs? And if the answer to that is yes, then we bring the lows to the highs, because we've already made that investment in that fertility over the years to get the highs to where they're at. So why do we want to deplete them and let them go backwards? So we just want to mainly, we watch the lows and bring them up. And it seems to be working for us.
So you're working with one particular grower that's produced some pretty phenomenal yields over the last several years. And speaking of, fertility, are y'all seeing any kind of decline in the soil levels, with some of these large yields that y'all are pulling off? Or, because our recommendations from soil fertility is, in that 60-65 bushel range on soybeans, which is, about average for a producer, but y'all are anywhere from 40 to 50 bushels better than that sometimes on field. So with those really high yields y'all seeing, are y'all seeing, declines in soil levels? Are y'all adding any extra to what's recommended coming from the soil testing lab?
So when I get those soil tests back, everything we have after we take the soil test is immediately taken behind the combine. After the field, after I say, hey, I'm done with that field, we bring in the chicken litter, and we're applying, based on the recommendation that I cite, a flat rate of anywhere from 1 ton to 2 tons of chicken litter, depending on the field. And then we're testing all of our litter, and then we're taking a low average, what I call a low average. If I have 3 or 4 piles of litter there, and one of those doesn't test out as good as the rest, then I use that low number as my average, and I'm crediting that chicken litter that I put out there and then I'm bringing back and I'm adding commercial fertilizer to supplement. But yes, we are increasing the amount of fertilizer. It's basically, if you take that recommendation for those 60, 65 bushel beans, and you have a yield goal in mind of what you want, you have to proportionally increase those recommendations. And that's what I've done is we have a yield goal and objective in mind, and I've raised those recommendations to fit so that I know we have plenty of food out there for those plants. So, and it works. So, and we're always willing to sit down and discuss that with people. I got several different platforms we can discuss that with and through. But anyway, we're back to talking about, look at different farming practices. Just because your grandpa or your dad did it doesn't mean you have to do it that way. Look at the twins versus the singles. Look at, irrigation practices. Look at surge versus just regular down the furrow type irrigation. Try multiple things. You'll find stuff that increases yields. Every year we can find something that helps us get another bushel or two out of it. And none of the stuff you do, if you don't record it, and I mean, I've got a producer that I work with that has a notebook that stays in the door pocket of his truck, and he records everything he does on every farm and every field, from whether it's a test plot we put in, to a tillage practice, to did we record new drain furrows and put them in the computer? He records everything, fertility, herbicides, so that we can always go look back. With the tractors and the equipment we have today, we can record our planting passes, we can record tillage passes, and all of that data can be looked at and gone back to, and you can find problems and you can find successes in that data. So keep good data, however you choose to do it, whether it's on a computer or in a notebook. A diary is data. So I think that's an important takeaway. And then always be willing to network and communicate your ideas with others. A good example is working with people. And I was once at a meeting, and I heard a guy speak, and he spoke of another high yield producer. And he said, when I was young and I was farming, I always had a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for this high yield producer. And I went to him, and I had my stuff, and I went to him as a young producer, the guy said, and he said, I asked him, he said, can you help me with what I got? And the guy kind of blew him off. And he said, I always strive to not be that person. And then I see people that do that become that person. And you can't do that. I think it's important. Farmers are a small community. We're a small percentage of the population. The entire world, even though we feed them and clothe them, are after us, with the EPA regulations, through politics, through urbanization, everything is attacking the farmer today. So it's important that we be willing to pass our ideas forward. If you have a success, share it with your neighbor so he can have the same success. There's plenty of room in this whole business for all of us. So, share your ideas and network your ideas forward.
Yeah, I just want to, echo what Robb said about experimenting on your own farm. Y'all do quite a bit of experimentation.
Yes, absolutely.
From varieties to fertility to seeding rates to all kinds of different things. And, the easiest one to do is a variety trial.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could pick up 4 or 5 different bags of different varieties, and like Robb mentioned, split your hoppers and plant you some 2 or 3 passes across the field. I mean, that's easy, and then y'all do, quite a bit more than just variety testing. But I tell farmers every year, if they got a question on something, put some strip plots out, look at varieties, look at foliar feeds, look at, insecticides, whatever it is. But, and a lot of people kind of balk on this, but to really get a good representation of how that treatment's working, you've got to have an untreated check. I mean, you've got to have something out there to compare it. You can't compare an 80-acre field. If you blanket apply a foliar feed to it, you really don't have anything to go back and check. So, I would get with, your local county agent, seed companies, chemical companies, they're all looking for places to do some experiments on. But, the way I look at it, the best data is data that comes from your farm.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Because it's your farm, it's your farming practices. That's probably the biggest key there is it's your practices. It's the way you farm. Yeah, those variety trials are really easy. If you're going to plant 5 soybean varieties, pick what you think your top 3 are of those varieties, put them in a strip trial and find you 3 or 4 more that you're not going to plant a lot of acres of. I've got a grower that before he puts a new variety on his farm, it goes through his strip trials. I mean, it's got a year of going through the strip trial, and then it's got possibly even got another year of going through 40 or 50 acre trial of it to see if it still holds together, especially if it's a really super high yielding variety or something stands out about it that we like. And then it gets put into big acres. And then when you put it in a big acre, sometimes it's still, you still have problems, but yeah. And then, these fertilizers and stuff like that, it's simple. Okay, we're going to spray 10 acres and it's 10 acres outside of a variety trial. And, then we'll harvest that 10 acres and we'll have a, 5 acre treated check or something like that. And then we may try another one right by it. And so it's really easy to do. With the combines and yield monitors, every bit of that can be done in a combine now. We don't have to have the weigh wagons and all, if you use one combine and you harvest a soybean plot and a fertility plot, and the difference between the treated check and the fertility shows to be 10 bushel, whether that combine's calibrated or not, the difference is 10 bushel still. So it's relative data, and it's good data. So that, hey, that product gave me a 10 bushel increase, whether I got a 60 to a 70 or a 90 to 100, you still got your increase. So it's worth looking at, but be willing to look at it. Doesn't take a lot of time. And just a few wire flags, you can stick it up. A lot of times seed companies will give you road signs to put up in your different varieties so you can mark them. And a lot of times you'll get seed companies will want to help you do that. But
a lot, sometimes this takes a little bit of time.
It does. If you really want to make them big, and we had a story is we had a corn yield trial one time that we invited several different companies to participate in. And when it was said and done, we had 30 varieties in it. It took us an entire day to plant that. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend picking you 5 to 6 good varieties, something you can do in 3 or 4 hours and get away from it, because we still, at the end of the day, we've got to be productive, and those planters have got to be running to get that crop planted.
Yeah, I think 30 would be a little excessive, but the reason I bring this up, it may take you an extra day and a half, 2 days, from the time you get it planted and then at harvest, but you might be able to find something that, could gain you a variety or a treatment that can gain you 5-10 bushels. And so now you're looking at,
huge money at the end
quite
of the
a bit
day.
of money for just, a few days, work. So, but I just want to, I commend Robb and all the work they do on their farm on looking at stuff. And I really wish a lot more would do the same thing. I think we would be a little bit further ahead.
To wrap this thing up, I told you in the beginning, I think one of the key takeaways, besides being having really good fertility, is you got to be timely. And always, between the farmer, the consultant, extension service, there's ways for you to be 100% on time every time. And so you've got to work down that road of being really timely. Since we're doing this virtually, we can't really do a question and answer session. So here's my contact information. feel free to contact me via cell phone or my email. I'd be happy to answer any questions concerning this presentation and visit with any of you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, thank you, Rob. And then stay tuned. Just a second, we'll start my presentation. So thanks. So I'd like to thank Rob for his portion of the presentation. Now we're going to move on into mine. So as I mentioned at the beginning of Rob's, my name's Jeremy Ross. I'm the extension agronomist for soybeans with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today I'll be giving a presentation titled Soybean Foliar Fertilizer Evaluation, What is Working? I'll be giving my thoughts on the use of foliar fertilizers and the results of a 2-year national study looking at 6 different products. Just a note, at the end of this presentation, there will be a QR code that certified crop advisors can scan to receive 1 credit of nutrient management CEUs. So farmers must really ask at least 2 fundamental questions about every product that they are asked to purchase and apply to their crop. 1, what is the frequency of crop response? And 2, what is the average yield increase? The answer to these 2 questions should be based on an adequate amount of unbiased, reputable research. With the large number of foliar fertilizer products on the market today, there is really no way that each product can be thoroughly researched by university scientists. I do want to make, a comment that, it is not a university scientist, there's not a university scientist that doesn't want to discover or recommend farming practices or products that enhance yield and profit. If there is a foliar applied fertilizer or a biostimulant that increases crop yield 10 to 20% for a minimal cost, we want to do the research and promote that product. Both tissue testing and foliar feeding have a place in row crop agriculture, but they must be adequately understood to ensure that they are properly implemented. So for, the last several years and for a while now, recommendations are being made to farmers based on crop tissue analysis. Most tissue nutrient concentrations used to define what is deficient or sufficient typically are approximate textbook values. These values are not always based on research. For many of the nutrients, critical concentrations are simply based on a survey of tissue collected from a large number of fields at a specific crop growth stage. The information from survey-based critical concentrations is agronomically interesting and useful, especially for troubleshooting field problems during the season. However, for many nutrients, there is little to no published information showing a valid relationship between crop yield increase and tissue nutrient concentrations that provide a good reason for making widespread recommendations to apply a foliar fertilizer. We've examined various products and have yet to find a product that produces significant yield increases beyond what a solid fertilization and crop management program can provide. Most critical nutrient concentrations are specific to a particular plant part and growth stage. Any deviation from that specific plant part or growth stage may cause a critical nutrient concentration to change. There is not a single nutrient concentration that can be used for the duration of a growing season to define nutrient deficiencies, especially during reproductive growth. For most well-fertilized and well-watered crops, biomass accumulation will be more rapid than nutrient uptake during much of the critical growth period when yield potential is set, and will cause plants' tissue concentrations to decline continuously as the plant develops. In 2019, 13 states established a research study evaluating foliar fertilizer products in 20 different environments to see if these products could increase soybean yields. Most of the states in this project received funding from their state QSSB, and we received funding from the Arkansas Soybean Promotion Board for this project. And I'd like to thank them at this point for their financial support of this project. The same products were evaluated in 2020 as well. We evaluated 6 different foliar products from 4 companies. We approached several companies to participate, and these were the only ones that elected to provide products for this test. Each company made the decision on which product to test. The trials were small plots with treatments arranged in a randomized complete block design, and each treatment replicated 6 times. Each product was applied at the recommended rate provided by each company, and all products were applied at the R3 soybean growth stage. Soil samples were collected from each plot, and tissue samples were taken twice, prior to application and 2 weeks after application. Recommended fertility was applied according to soil test results and university recommendations for each state. Plots were harvested at maturity and yields were adjusted to 13% moisture. This table lists the products that we tested, the corresponding companies, and the product rate that was provided by the company. You can see 2 products from AgroLiquid, Fertile Rain, and Sure K. Both were applied at 3 gallons per acre. Harvest More Urea Mates from Stoller at 2.5 pounds per acre. Smart BMO and Smart Quattro Plus from Brant. And then Maximum Impact K from Nutrien at 1.5 gallons per acre. This table lists the nutrients supplied in pounds per acre for each product tested. Individual nutrients and amounts varied between each product. The number of nutrients in each product ranged from 2 in the Maximum Impact K to 10 nutrients in the Harvest More Urea Mate. The next 4 slides are results from the 2 locations in Arkansas. In 2019 and 2020, tests were established at the Newport Extension Center in Newport, Arkansas, and the Pine Tree Experiment Station near Colt, Arkansas. Soybean grain yields in bushels per acre are on the left axis or the y-axis, and the treatments and rates are on the bottom axis or the x-axis. All treatments had average soybean yields between 53.1 to 56.7 bushels per acre at the Newport location in 2019. When we analyzed the yield data for this location, no significant yield differences were seen when the products were compared to the untreated check, and no differences were seen between individual products. In 2019, at the Pine Tree location, similar results were observed. The average treatment yield ranged from 60.2 to 65.2 bushels per acre. 3 products had average grain yields that were numerically greater than the untreated check, and 3 with average grain yields numerically less than the untreated check. But again, we saw no significant difference in yield between the untreated check nor between the individual products. Similar to the 2019 results at Newport, the 2020 test showed no significant difference in yield when the products were compared to the untreated check and between individual products. Their average soybean yield for the treatments ranged from 54.5 to 57.5 bushels per acre. The one location for the last 2 years in Arkansas where we saw a significant yield gain was at the Pine Tree location this past year. One product, Sure K, had a statistical greater yield than the untreated check, a 3.6 bushel per acre increase in yield. All other products were not statistically different from the untreated check. The average grain yield for the treatments were 60.2 to 66.6 bushels per acre, with the untreated check mean at yield averaging 63 bushels per acre. Looking at the nutrients supplied from each of the products, it is hard to explain why Sure K yielded greater than the other products. There is not a single nutrient or combination of nutrients in common between Sure K and the other 3 products that had soybean yields not statistically different to Sure K. which were Smart BMO, Smart Quattro Plus, and Maximum Impact K. We are still waiting for the results of the tissue samples to see if any of the nutrient concentrations in these tissue samples could explain the increases in yield from the Sure K. This is a map of the 2020 location, or the 20 locations in 2019 with the average yield at each location. Average yields range from 27.8 to 82.8 bushels per acre. This study represents several different environments and is a significant portion of the soybean producing region in the United States. So just a few thoughts to kind of wrap up this presentation. If we look at root and root hairs, they are specialized for uptake of water and nutrients from the soil. Thus, they provide the best route for getting a deficient nutrient into the plant. Leaves are designed to collect sunlight, conduct photosynthesis, and transport photosynthetic products to other parts of the plant and transpire water vapor to cool the plant. Leaf surfaces are not conducive for absorption of fertilizer nutrients. Because very small amounts of nutrients can enter plant leaves, the macronutrients nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus should not be considered for foliar applications. However, micronutrients applied as a foliar fertilizer may provide benefits for the current crop, but only if deficiency symptoms are confirmed. There is no substitute for a strong soil fertility program that is based on soil testing results to support the maximum yield potential of a soybean crop. So to conclude, in 2019, of the 20 sites where these 6 products were tested, only one product showed a significant yield increase compared to the untreated check, and that was one location in Wisconsin and one product. In Arkansas in 2020, we observed one product at the Pine Tree location that had a significant yield increase compared to the untreated check. Foliar nutrient products do have a fit in row crop production when nutrient deficiencies are observed. However, we do not see an economical benefit where deficiencies are not seen and foliar nutrient products are used as blanket applications. Tissue testing is a great idea, and when done properly, the results can help identify potential problems that require additional research or crop management adjustments. And in some cases, a research-based recommendation can be implemented to correct any existing nutrient deficiency. While tissue sampling is encouraged at the appropriate critical growth stage, mid and late season foliar fertilizer applications based on tissue analysis results, we believe are largely unwarranted. Again, thank you for watching this the last 2 presentations. If you should happen to have any questions, please feel free to contact me or Rob. Our information was provided on the last 2 slides. So the last slide in Rob's presentation and mine, the last one. For certified crop advisors, please use the following QR code to apply for one of the credits, for 1 credit of nutrient management CEUs.